Hi everyone, it's Paul here, and I've been making a series of films called My Kind of Genius, and last week I gave a short talk about somebody called Gordon Cullen, and I was thinking about what I'd be saying this week, and I suddenly had an insight. I don't have to talk about genius as though it's uniquely associated with particular individuals, and this week I want to break out from that little box that I'd made for myself and talk about a building. And the building that expresses genius the best for me is the Pompidou or Beaubourg Centre in Paris. Indeed, I consider this to be the most significant and influential building of the 20th century. If you don't know the Pompidou Centre in Paris, it's the thing that looks like a Meccano built toy that sits in the middle of the Marais, and it was designed in the early 70s by two architects, young architects, Richard Rogers and Renzo Piano. They were hardly known at that time. I learned about them through my father's interest in architecture. He was a professional architect, and the magazines and documentation that emerged in the early 70s as the building began to take shape in Paris. The idea for the Pompidou Centre, as expressed by Piano and Rogers, was for a sort of multifunction space that could be rearranged at will to express different forms of culture. They were very keen to redefine the cultural institution as an exciting and open space rather than as a kind of mausoleum. So that in itself was exciting. Piano and Rogers had got their idea out of a series of 60s experiments in architecture, notably by Cedric Price and Joan Littlewood, who had conceptualised a space called the Fun Palace, and in the experimentations of the Archigram group from London. The realisation of the Pompidou Centre was greatly facilitated by a group of engineers associated with Ove Arup, and the best known of these now is somebody called Peter Rice, who collected his memoirs in this book before he sadly died at a very young age. Peter Rice and the engineers were instrumental in being able to create not just an engineering structure which would hold the thing up, but doing so in a way that spoke the same sort of language as the great engineering structures of the 19th century, the bridges and palaces in iron and steel that had been put up in the 19th century. So the building is emotionally resonant, which is quite unusual for modern buildings. And I think that's thanks to a combination of Rogers and Piano and also the engineers and the technical people who were working on the realisation of the plan. I should mention too that one of the French engineers who was involved in the project as a sort of consultant was someone called Jean Prouvé, whose work I very much admire as well. And the other thing that's exciting about the Pompidou Centre is that it sits in front of a very large sloping piazza, and Rogers was interested especially in the idea of the building as a focal point for social space, and these ideas about how buildings work in relation to people, space and cities had come from his own father's interest in architecture and urban planning in Italy in the middle part of the 20th century. So you can see there's lots and lots of different types of intelligence coming to bear upon the shape and structure of the building. But the shape and structure of the building also changed the kinds of exhibitions and the kind of culture that could be thought about and expressed within that space. And it was really exciting for me later on in the 1970s to go and visit two of the really important founding exhibitions at the Pompidou Centre. One was called Paris-Berlin, one was called Paris-Moscow. And these were part of a series of exhibitions that traced the links between these major cities. I should say that the history of modernism is usually configured as an international phenomenon that connects Moscow, Berlin, Paris and New York. So it was entirely appropriate for the Pompidou Centre to launch itself with these massive exhibitions that join together personalities, movements, different types of cultural collaboration, and to present these very big multimedia, multi-channel exhibitions. And those are derived largely, I think, from the pioneering work of Charles and Ray Eames in exhibition design in the US. It was an amazing thing. Eames famously said that in the end everything connects, and one of the things about the Pompidou Centre was that as a space and a structure and as an institution, it allowed all of those things to connect in a really exciting way. And so it became a sort of mind palace which you could visit, which was very, very exciting to me. So it was a work of genius. And I remember that Andy Warhol once famously said that museums should become more like department stores and department stores should become more like museums. And it's difficult with Andy Warhol because he was often saying something really profound in an easy throwaway line, but I think he really nailed it there. And for me personally, my visits to the Pompidou Centre, the excitement of the engineering, the architecture, the open space, but also the impressive realization of its cultural events was really transformative. It changed my life. And one of my great pleasures, I think, is that I have met Richard Rogers, and I was able to tell him that that building changed my life. He seemed to be quite pleased about that. So my kind of genius this week is the Pompidou in Paris. Thank you.